is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Tobago hoteliers warn U.S.-Venezuela tensions could hit tourism. Imbert blames poor decision-making for the PNM election defeat. The government fires URP workers in a corruption crackdown. And internationally, conservative activist Charlie Kirk shot dead at Utah College event. Now for the details. Tourism stakeholders in Tobago are raising concerns about rising tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela, warning it could impact the island's tourism industry. Former THTA Vice President Carol Ann Birchwood James says visitors need to feel Tobago is safe and peaceful, and recent military activity in regional waters has created uncertainty. The Tobago Chamber added that conflict could disrupt shipping lanes, energy security and bookings, especially from key markets in the US, UK and Canada. Minority Leader Kelvin Morris is calling for THA Chief Secretary Fali Augustine to state his position, saying Tobago's tourism and fisherfolk are at stake. Diego Martin Northeast MP Colum Imbert says poor leadership decisions cost the PNM the April 20th general election. Speaking at a party rally, Imbert compared the PNM's internal challenges to divisions in the U.S. Democratic Party, saying ego and a lack of democratic decision-making weakened the party's chances. He admitted the PNM has made repeated mistakes in past elections, but insisted it still governs better than its rivals. Imbert urged new leader Penelope Beckles to focus on connecting with the public to rebuild support. An undisclosed number of workers at the Unemployment Relief Program have been dismissed as part of the government's restructuring of the program. Rural Development Minister Khadija Amin says widespread corruption and ghost gangs made the move necessary, but promised that more meaningful jobs will be created. Some affected workers say they were left blindsided, calling the dismissals unfair and devastating for families who depend on the income. Opposition MP Kareem Marcel condemned the firing as cruel, saying they target the most vulnerable. He argued corruption claims should be dealt with by police, not mass job cuts. Internationally, in the United States, conservative activist Charlie Kirk has been shot and killed while speaking at a college campus in Utah. The 31-year-old, who led the Turning Point U.S. organization and was a strong supporter of Donald Trump, was struck in the neck during a public debate event. The killing has shocked many of his young conservative followers, with Trump calling it a dark moment for America. The incident comes amid growing concerns about political violence in the U.S., with recent shootings targeting public figures on both sides of the political divide. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Welcome to the program. Here, let's just tell you this, something that was carried as a statement. It was issued in public on August 30th. It was written by Robert Lehunt, a former government minister and international banker. Once again, the country is witnessing a relentless attack on state employees. I was told just yesterday of the forced early retirement of the T&Tech general manager. This is indeed unfortunate. I recall when I came into office as Minister of Public Utilities in 2017, I met Mr. Ramsuk with a lot of allegations about his political ties. I worked with him, and so did my predecessor, until he retired. Whatever was his political leaning, he was an excellent general manager, and he developed an excellent team with a well-documented succession plan, which resulted in the present GM being appointed. That person actually served as Mr. Ramsuk's chief technical manager. It is sad that a person, Mr. Bell, with over 35 years of dedicated service to a utility, which we all have to admit performed admirably in light of several financial constraints, is being pushed out of office and replaced by an individual 2 levels below. Under no circumstances should we condone this type of behavior. We are sadly getting immune to it as it is becoming the norm. regardless of our political positions as professionals, we must stand up against this type of behavior. We definitely do not want it in our country. It will undermine the credibility of all our institutions, and the time to stand up is now. It was written by Robert Lehunt and appeared in the public on August 30th. Mr. Lehunt is our guest on the program this morning. Good to have you. Thanks for coming on. I think you have to unmute, because I'm seeing you speaking, but we can't hear you.
Yes, good morning, Andy. Sorry about that.
That's
good morning,
okay.
Trinidad and Tobago. It's indeed a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so what's your, I want to ask you then, the last sentence of it says, it will undermine the credibility of all our institutions. The time to stand up and now. You're saying that we are sadly getting immune to what you see as happening in the public space. It is becoming the norm. Regardless of our political positions as professionals, we must stand up against this type of behavior. We definitely do not want it in our country. It will undermine the credibility of all our institutions, and the time to stand up is now. What do you mean when you say the time to stand up?
Well, you know, Andy, I think we have a lot of challenges in this country. We all talk about them a lot every single day. But what we need to get over a lot of our challenges, a lot of the improving productivity, improving efficiency, everything, we need to have good people in jobs. We need to have professional management in jobs. And therefore, I think we all have lived through the concept of, and which were recommended by a number of professionals and a number of committees with regard to the immediate changing of all the boards when someone moves out of office, especially the state enterprises. And that's very disruptive. And there have been talk about in private sector boards move, you know, some people move out at different times. Could we put a system in place to have some type of continuity from a board level perspective? But that has never caught on. And we live with the fact, and again, we have gotten immune to it, that as a government change, the board changes. I think the idea of the professional staff being moved out, hung out of office because of their, I don't know, political suasions or whatever, I think it is not right. I think people need to be, if their people are not performing, I agree 100%. But we are all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We are all entitled to our political affiliations. And therefore, it will set a bad precedent in being able to attract professionals for these jobs. It is totally unfair as it relates to people spending their lives and then and being promoted into jobs. And that will have a negative impact on the running of these organizations at a time when we try it and when we need to get the best professional help that we can. The concept of it being immune, as you know, I mean, we started with WASA, we went to MTS, we're now into TNTech. And you know, it is something that we just accepting. And I myself, I'm not seeing the cry against it that I would have liked to see. So I just decided in my own right to stand up and say something about it.
What sort of feedback you may have had between when this appeared and as we speak today? What was the sense of?
You know, I mean, there have been people who are support. I have gotten people who have written and support. I've written other articles in the papers. But honestly, I think a lot of professional people, that a lot of people feel intimidated A lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago depend on the state, even professionals depend on the state who are not working in these enterprises. They depend on the state, lawyers, land surveyors, contractors, etc., for jobs. And we are quickly running to a position whereby when somebody wins or you have political office, both directly and indirectly, you have to be a member of a particular group to survive. And as I said, for a Trinidad and Tobago, that will not work because you have about 50, in most elections, we run very close. And therefore, you cannot run a country with only 50% of the population feeling motivated and feeling empowered simply because they lost an election by 16,000 votes. That type of democracy or that type of productivity is not something that lends itself to good governance.
Yeah, and you say here, in fact, that, and I'm quoting you, I recall when I came into office as Minister of Public Utilities in 2017, I met Mr. Ramsuk with a lot of allegations about his political ties.
That is true. I mean, you know, when you go in as a minister, I mean, whether right or not, and again, I mean, nobody has a, let me start by saying that people have a right to be or to vote for whoever they want. And I never got a confirmation whether Mr. Ramsuk was or wasn't. That was his right, and neither did I seek to try to find out. But everyone makes those type of allegations. There were lots of allegations. I get a number of engineers at WASA, for example, the guy in charge of North, the guy in charge of South. Everyone will come and tell you stories that this one was a PNM or this one was a UNC. But what you have to do as a minister, and you have to insist, listen, at the end of the day, what I'm interested in is productivity. I have a plan. I need to get certain targets achieved. And we have to start to run the country immune from politics and start to run the country from who could get the job done, what are the targets that we need to get achieved, right? And what are we putting out there that will help the citizens and provide the service that we are called upon to do. And once we have that as our major objective, you know, the politics in my mind becomes secondary. I would say, and again, I had a fantastic working relationship with Mr. Ramsuk. I found him to be a very professional, very responsive person. He helped in every time you called him for assistance because he was providing service to the public. It didn't matter. And again, we spoke about what was very disheartening about this particular situation. I mean, coming from the private sector, looking at succession planning was always important to me. So we talked about that a lot. What will happen? Mr. Ramsuk assured me he had a very strong bench. I made sure that the chairman had interactions with him about what exactly do we have in place in case when you leave, in case something else happens, because those things are important in running a utility, right? And we had a group of people, and again, I remember this particular person's name. He wasn't the only person, but this person was identified, Mr. Bell, by Mr. Ramsuk way back in 2017 as a potential person down the road. Because at that time, he was a young, bright area manager coming up in the system. This is a person, what is even this? This is a person who has worked their entire life from university at the utility. This is not a person just appointed 5 years ago. This is a person who has held all the major positions and was the chief technical person, right, which is the de facto deputy general manager in the last appointment. So this is a person who has been groomed together with others for this job from a long time ago. So this idea that after you have worked in an organization 30 years, 35 years, you find yourself, and then within 6 months, the person was acting as a GM, a new board elected 2 months ago, and after being in office 1 month, they do an evaluation, and then the person is being told that, well, you need to revert to your job as chief technical officer. That is not how we do things in Trinidad and Tobago. As you also saw, you heard what happened with the person from WASA. I mean, again, we could talk about that. That was, again, that was a ridiculous situation.
So, right, what do you want to see? How should the society begin to at least push back at that?
Well, you know, I think programs like this are important. I think the professional and the journalists in this country are important. I wrote a piece the other day talking about the second key, which is really what democracy speaks about, is that the need for citizens. There's a difference between spectators and citizens. A spectator looks at a game from a football match. A citizen is a citizen is a person who gets involved. And getting involved requires you to speak out. The journalists need to speak out about it. And we need to just put pressure on the respective governments, and when these things happen, letting individuals know that it is not correct. Whether or not how successful that would be, because at the end of the day, a lot of times, as we have also seen, when you do not comply, you are fired. The country ends up paying. In the case of the central bank governor, I listened to his case. I read his case recently on the newspaper. And chances are the country is going to have to pay him a substantial amount of money. But that type of political victimization is something that we have to stand up and say, this is not right. Now, how that is going to happen, it has to start by moving forward, by letting our voices be heard, etc. I mean, that is one way, and I am more than prepared to listen to others who could come up with other views. But it has to be that we have to open our voices. It is sad what is happening with the labor unions. Things like that are happening, and the labor unions around us have gone silent. We would have hoped that labor unions will recognize good governance or good labor practice, and whether it is happening at this level or at the level where you are representing or not, you would recognize that, listen, if that tendency starts to come in, it will start to filter down, start at the CEO level, and it will start to come through the organization. And therefore, I would have hoped that my labor unions would start to stand up against this. And let me be clear, I mean, whether or not this is happening in the PNM, when the PNM is in charge or the UNC is in charge, to me, it doesn't matter. It is the process. But again, I am disappointed and I'm silent. I'm disappointed that the labor unions themselves have also gone silent on this matter. No one is saying anything.
Yeah, because what you say here is that people were coming to you when you were Minister of Public Utilities to point out that one of these persons, people had an idea of what their political persuasions or alignments were, and bringing that to your attention. So that it is something that, what I'm getting at is that it has crept under our skins in a way that is difficult to, we have to talk about. Probably the generation that is on the rise now may be able to look at this in a different way, but to what extent it probably is fatalistic to think that the way in which that issue has captured some of the minds of some of us, it is difficult, it is close to impossible to address and to pull back.
But Andy, I mean, you know, this is not strange. I mean, listen, you go to the United States, you have this split between whether you're a Democrat or you are a Republican. You know, in most, when you have party politics, this is a side effect of what happens when you have party politics. All right. But I think the, you know, and we have grown accustomed, and as happened in other countries, we have seen board of directors removed. But I think this concept that we are going to be seeing career individuals removed from office, I think that is taking it to another level. And as I said, I find this silence is almost getting us to believe, well, that is now going to be the new norm. So the norm that the boards have been removed is one thing, right? Although people have pushed back at that, knowing that that is not proper corporate governance and continuity. But we are now going to see a new norm starting. And that is dangerous. It is dangerous even from the perspective of attracting the right type of individuals to these jobs. I mean, we already have a problem in attracting the right type of individuals to want to go into politics for a number of reasons, right? So you're not getting your best and your brightest going into politics. But it's therefore is important to have your best and your brightest running the organizations and these state enterprises. But which best and bright person, which good person will leave a job in a genuine private sector to go and take up a job as the CEO of Petrotrin or NGC or TNTech or WASA or TSTT? Who will leave a job now and go and take that when you recognize that in politics it is possible that you will only be there for 5 years? You will not attract the best people, and therein is a slow decay, right, of when it starts to impact on the service and the delivery of these organizations. We're in a country with 1.3 million people, right? We have an abundance of qualified people, yes, I agree, but 1.3 million people compared to other countries, we have a limited pool of people who are able to perform admirably and satisfactorily in these positions. This is not something that is going to be good for Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, I think it will sort of prevent people who have the ability, but who don't want to make switches because they don't want to get tied up in these conceptions about whoever is in the government, happen to be in the government at a point in time, that you become affiliated and associated with them because you got an appointment.
Because you got in the job. I mean, look, for example, I mean, look at the process that happened recently and the uproar with First Citizen Bank. I mean, again, process is important. A lot of times, you know, I went to big management schools around the world, and what came out of it is process is just as important as the end result. I mean, how could you have a minister of government speaking to a CEO of a bank? I mean, that sets itself up for a bad structure, a bad corporate governance, because a bank is a very sensitive institution. You don't want your politicians getting so close to your financial institution. Those banks have a lot of confidential information. A lot of people are already sometimes concerned about putting money into a government bank because they're scared of how far the hand of the government could reach. Well, when actions like that happens, you build those fears rather than reducing them. So we have to mature past this. You know, it's a part of our development. We are 63 years, but I mean, we have to move rapidly and develop because the world is watching. Who will want to take that job afterwards? Who will want to take the job in WASA as the CEO of WASA now? if we put an ad and we are trying to get the best, this person, an ad went out. The first person who qualified for that job was a person on the African continent, all right, who was supposed to come and take that job. That was, this ad went worldwide looking for a good person with a good track record in water management. The person, could you imagine someone who would have taken that job, left Africa, come to take a job here in Trinidad, and a new government comes in place, and within 1 month, you haven't even gotten a chance to perform, you are fired. That does not set a good example, because we need to be able to attract the best and the brightest. I remember that particular individual. I went to meetings with him when I was the executive director of the IDB representing Barbados. And I had meetings with him about the plan to stop the non-revenue water in Barbados with the IDB and a number of their specialists. And everybody was impressed with his ability. What happened? What board or minister could have actually evaluated this man's progress, all right, with it after 1 week in office? After 1 week in office. And I mean, it is obvious clearly what is going to happen in that situation. The country is going to pay. We're going to hear 5 years down the road what is the settlement that needed to be paid. So we're presently probably paying a salary for 2 CEOs, one in the job and one that we have sent back, for no reason.
Yeah.
No reason. I mean, how could that make sense at a time when we are looking to save money and talking about efficiency, because we can't pay URP ghost gangs and we can't pay CPEP workers, and we're looking to cut costs here, there, and everywhere, all right? And then we end up paying millions of dollars because we just want to put our man in office.
Yeah, I feel tempted to, but I think it's important that I should say that I have had my own experience with that. Moving between administrations, being hired for a position under what was the People's Partnership in 2010, and then 2015 I had to go because the government had changed, and then I got a job with the government that came in under the Ministry of the man who's now the General Secretary of the People's National Movement. And for a lot of people, I may have crossed the lines twice, and probably I'm lucky to still be around in any kind of way. I don't know what the position is with the present administration, but the point I want to make though is that there probably never has been an administration in office in Trinidad and Tobago in which there is participation by so many trade union leaders, and you're not seeing, because some people have raised that in response to your post there. What are the reactions of the trade union leaders who are part of this coalition, the UNC Plus?
Well, again, and that to me, and I mean, I'm sure, Andy, when you put that post, some people might have been saying is that, well, why is he talking now? He was in the PNM and he did the same thing. The reality is, I mean, for example, even from my own personal interaction with you, how much that this is not something that I have been speaking about now. I have been speaking about this even when I was in private sector and objecting to what was happening with you at the time. I mean, we had those conversations before. So this is not something that I'm talking about now. And I mean, when I was a minister, I ensured that I operated in a manner. But you see, it sets a precedent, because think about it. And then how do you respond? How do you respond to this government coming in and a lot of people losing their jobs? When a new government comes in, I mean, what is the expectation? Is it that, well, I lost my job under this regime and this person got the job, and by assumption, because they were affiliated with the party. Now that I am back in office, or my party is back in office, what is the expectation? I will go back and get my job, isn't it? And if you decide, any political party decides, no, this is not how to govern, let's not do it that way. Well, you pay the consequences of it next time by your people not coming out to vote, right? So I mean, it really needs to stop, or we really need to make sure that it doesn't get into the fabric. And I'm just, you know, we heard isolated cases of it, all right, before, right? The most public one was the guy with regard to the central bank governor before, right? But I think it is now becoming, and that's where I fear, it is now becoming the norm. We first heard about WhatsApp. Then we heard about, not many people know, I mean, the CEO of MTS. That person was also sent home. The person of TN Tech was also sent home. It all seems to be under one ministry. I hope this is isolated to just public utilities. But I mean, I really do not want to see this catch on in the country. It is dangerous. And as I said, it is dangerous politically because it could snowball. It is dangerous in the productivity of the organizations and attracting the right level of professionals into these jobs. It is dangerous because you wonder what type of, even when somebody else is in a job, and you get it, how could that person really, when the whole organization knows how you got that job, what moral authority do you have to govern? How are you going to get the best out of the people who are looking on at you, who got that job this week?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay, I was, when you were speaking about it, the issue with the lady at First Citizens, I was wondering, even before anybody said anything, suggested that it there may be in politics behind it. You think so?
Well, you know, Andy, I mean, when, you know, they're saying if it looks like a...
It looks like a duck.
It looks like a...
A duck.
It looks like a duck.
It squawks like a duck. It's a duck.
Probably it's a duck, right?
Yes.
And, you know, the concern that I have with things like First Citizen, and that's why in banking, we have a lot of things, you know, nobody trusts one another in banking. You have dual signatures and you ask all the pertinent questions, and it's just not about trust because there's a process. You have to follow process because you're dealing with confidence, you're dealing with people's money. And that's a very nebulous thing. So, and I spent a lot of my time in banking, so process is very important. And I mean, whatever the reason, the approach that was taken dealing with the First Citizen situation was totally unacceptable. Unacceptable. And again, if it is, it definitely looks like it smells because we did have some statements being made in the Senate before about the performance or what happened in First Citizen Bank. I mean, all of those things, politicians need to be cautious and watch what they are saying. You can't just make these aspersions when you're dealing with a commercial bank. But it was done before, all right? It was mentioned in the Senate, and now we end up seeing this type of unprecedented action with regard to First Citizen Bank. Again, I will not venture and say, because I am not 100% clear or no, but it definitely looks like that, which is a dangerous precedent.
All right, we're gonna have to leave it there, but thank you very much, Robert Lahant.
So, okay, thanks again, Andy. And I mean, you know, let me say that I think the work that you guys are called upon to do in having these types of discussions, and continuing to let the public understand and not let it just pass by. I made that post on my Facebook. You picked up on it and you invited me to speak about it, and I appreciated that. But we need to do more of these things, because at the end of the day, you as journalists and all professionals need a responsibility to also guide and lead. A lot of people, citizens, a lot of people listening to me might be saying, I hear you, I agree with you, but what could I do?
Yes.
Right? And therefore, what they are looking for is guidance. What they're looking for is how they could raise their voices. And what they're looking for is people like ourselves to bring these matters to their attention and to understand that we're having these conversations. I spent 3 years in politics, and I tell you, politicians respond to public demand and public outcry. Right? That is really, if you want to change a society, you have to ensure that the politicians, that you speak up. That is the language that politicians listen to. And therefore, what we are talking about here is not unnecessary. It is not talk. It just needs to be galvanized and escalated to even a higher level.
Yeah, and it's necessary to point these things out, because, you know, I'm going to say there are some people who, well, a lot of people would know part of where I come from, because, you know, I want to say that a lot of people, there was a man who refused to shake my hand when I went to work for the partnership in 2010, because, well, people were seeing it as UNC. He said, you're UNC now. And then when the government changed in 2015, a little while after that, I was approached by Foster Cummings, the Minister of Youth Development and National Service, and I went to work for him. And so I probably made some enemies on the other side, and there were people who were fascinated by that. You now working for the PNM? I said, no, I'm working for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And people can't make the distinction between those two things, but so we live with it.
Yeah, and I mean, even in some cases, people get tagged by association. And again, it's so dangerous in Trinidad and Tobago, when one way we are talking about unity, we are talking about bringing the races together, all right, which is what we want. We're talking about building a Trinidad and Tobago society. And again, because of the proliferation of certain groups, ethnic groups in the two political parties, people get tagged, all right? And whether or not it is right or wrong, nobody knows where you vote or where you didn't vote. But some of these aspersions are wrong. Yeah. I mean, I remember, again, just simply because of my association, my brother was working under the People's Partnership government. He was never involved in any politics. He, unlike me, he was working, left his job at Tech, all right, as a senior manager, took up a job in the government service on contract to serve the country. The People's Partnership came in place. They decided they target him. He's a PNM. The contract was just terminated. No reason. The contract was terminated. Had a 3-year contract, he worked for 8 months. Now, I mean, is that right? Is that what it is that is that what we want to encourage?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, and on the other hand, when I am a government minister in the PNM, all right, and my brother now gets back a job, which by the way, he didn't. But if he did, everyone would point their finger and say, well, he got that job because he was a PNM, his brother is a minister. So damn if you do, damn if you don't.
All right, it's a discussion that has to continue, but thank you very much.
All right, Andy, take care and good morning again, Trinidad and Tobago.
Robert Lehunt. That'll do it for us for this edition of the program. Thanks for watching. We see you next time.
WESN.
I am Dr. your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions,